Good evening. It's evening here. Zion Mike is here again. I quickly want to um, discuss, not very much in details, the particular issues that actually affect much of Africa, especially the east of Africa, is an issue that connect two continents, Europe and Africa. We understand that in the 18th century, all group of European leaders met in Berlin to divide and split Africa into different portions, and they shared the continent among themselves, disregarding the people who are living in the continent or whom the continent belonged to, the native of the continent. And they succeeded to claim millions of Africans, millions of them were killed by the Europeans. Eventually, but that followed after the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, and colonialism, imperialism actually followed, which eventually lasted for many centuries. But other countries in Europe decided eventually left the continent. But there is one country that haven't left, that still remain, and that country is France. France, to this moment, is still exploiting its uh, African countries, the 14 of them. I don't like to use the word France colonies, former colonies. I don't like to use that word because it was not colonization, it was imperialism. All right. And I've been trying to research the complexity of the matter, the reason why the 14 countries in Africa will be paying taxes to France since the day of their independence, so-called independence. Um, they should not be independent because the land belonged to them in the first place. They are African and Africa belonged to them. So they are not independent. I don't believe in the concept of independence. Nobody can give you freedom. Freedom belongs to you. You are created to be free. Now, every human being is created as a free moral agent. So there is no country in Africa that is independent. I That is a misconception. Okay, so I hope you get that very clear. And all these 14 African countries, the territory which France were actually in control of by force, of course, are still having to deposit their national reserve, about 50% in the French banks. And they are paying colonial taxes also to France, about 14% of their annual budget to France for the benefit of colonization. And in the first place, that is lacking in logic. France was not never invited to Africa by those African people to say, okay, France, please come to colonize us, we need you. And then they sign agreement and say, okay, this is what we're going to pay at the end of the whole colonization process. That wasn't the case. They were terrorists. They were terrorists who invaded Africa, exploited the continent, and others actually left. Other countries like Italy, like Britain, like Belgium, like Netherlands, like other countries left, but France still haven't, without asking for any colonial taxes, actually. But it's only France who, after leaving, demand a colonial tax from those territory. And those countries, few countries like Guinea, who actually opposed to the idea of paying colonial taxes to France, do you know what France did? The so-called civilized France. You call France civilized, right? But you don't know what is the meaning of civilization? To be civilized. Who is a civilized person? Is it having the ability to create having some technical knowledge to be able to invent some kind of digital equipment and all that? Is that what makes you civilized? Okay, if you are defining a civilized person in that context, all right, okay, we can say that most of Europe are civilized. But if we say that in terms of relating with one another, with peace, with justice, with harmony, then Europe is the least civilized country in the world. I repeat that. If we're talking about relating, if you are defining a civilized person in a context of diplomatic and polite and relationship with other people who are not really from your clan, from your ethnicity, from your nationality, from your so-called race, then Europe is the least civilized country on the planet Earth. So there have never been a time that Europe have been civilized. If you want to define a civilized individual in the context I just mentioned, in the context of good relation with people of other culture. So France and why Guinea opposed to the idea of paying colonial tax to France. Do you know what France did in Guinea? All the infrastructure that they built, public buildings, schools, all the infrastructure, France destroyed them. Can you imagine that? Is that not unreasonable? Even their tractors, their machineries, everything was completely destroyed. The research centers, the library built by France were completely destroyed. This is in a recent memory. This is not something that happened many ancient times, right? But I'm not saying that all that is a problem. I don't see that as a problem because the countries can actually get developed despite France. All right, without France. All right. There are many countries who has developed and become a very thriving economy without the help of Western countries. Isn't that correct? So, but I'm just trying to draw your attention to the atrocity of France. People like to travel to France. Many Africans like to travel to France. What do you find attractive in that in those people? What do you find attractive? According to the former French president, he says that he must agree that the larger percentage of the cash of the money in their banks come from the exploitation of Africa. This is the ways of a French president, of a former French president. Search it. Sarkozy, somehow, something like that. I have not actually cared to search his name, but it's true. You can find the information on the internet. All right. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? So, which means that the aid and support is not moving from Europe or from the West to Africa. Is Africa is the aid is moving from Africa to Europe and to the West. Get it and get it very clear again. I said that help is not moving from West to Africa, but help is moving from Africa. Instead, help flows from Africa to Europe and to the West. It has been that way since the very beginning. You don't just know it, all right? And they pay around 500 billion, the Francophone, the French-speaking countries. I would prefer to refer to those countries as French-speaking countries. They can speak your language, it's not a problem. We have our language, there are over 3,000 languages spoken in all across Africa. Okay, but I don't like to describe those countries as French colony, former colony. All right, I don't prefer that. All right, and these huge resource that is moving out from Africa to France, when it lands in France, it gets to circulate around the European Union and it benefits all the countries in the European Union. This is 21st century Europe, barbarianism. Barbarianism in the 21st century Europe. Barbarianism in the 21st century Europe. And other countries in the European Union still allow France to continue in this type of exploitation. And yet, still hypocritically refer to themselves as the leaders of democracy. Can you imagine that? You can be a criminal and at the same time be a judge. Get that clear. You can be a criminal and at the same time be a judge. All right. They allow this type of heinous crime to be continued without them sanctioning France for what it's doing in Africa. Why? Because they have interest in it. It's benefiting them. So we could as well say that the European Union is supporting France in the exploitation of Africa. So for those countries who saw what France did to Guinea, that put up a resistance against the payment of colonial tax to France, they got scared because they do not want the similar situation to happen to them. A situation whereby France will destroy all the infrastructure that they built during the time of imperialism, their time of imperialism in their country. So those was maintained. And do you know that most of the coups that have happened in Africa, that the portion of African head of states, especially in the French-speaking countries, were sponsored by France itself. They sponsored a rebel to take out those leaders who want to fight for the freedom of his country from France, the like of Thomas Sankara, and several others. There are many. There are many. There are many. The one of Togo, and then once France succeed to take out those people, those presidents, those head of states who want to obtain a freedom from France by all means necessary, and then France will install a puppet, president or head of state, to be in a position as a president or head of state for the next 10, 30 years. And because once that puppet is in power, in control of the country, and then the person can run the country in the interest of France. And France is still the one printing the currencies of 14 African countries in the 21st century. In the 21st century. But I don't blame France that much because those French-speaking countries in Africa paying such a colonial taxes. I won't call it colonial taxes. I would rather say they are paying because of their ignorance. They are paying a price for their ignorance because we live in a world whereby when you are ignorant, weak, stupid, silly, and then you will get to lose a lot of things, right? You will get exploited. So they are paying for their stupidity, not colonialism, not the colonial tax. So they are paying for being silly and stupid. So they are not paying for their colonial taxes. All right. So tell me, what is the problem that the East Africa and the West Africa and the South Africa and the North Africa cannot unite and kick France out of Africa? Just kick France out. Just kick out. Just agree and kick him out. Kick France out. Why can't they do that? I don't understand it. I don't understand it. So if you see the relationship, I see the pictures that the head of states of the country speaking speaking French in Africa, the pictures that they take with French presidents, it's like like they love their enemy. The Stockholm syndrome. They've developed a Stockholm syndrome. It's a syndrome whereby an oppressed person will get to fall in love and think positively and good about its own oppressor. It's called Stockholm syndrome. And that is the relationship, the feelings that all the Africans have with regards to France. It's an unhealthy relationship. In the 21st century, oh, mamma mia. If I am the president of Nigeria, I will change the trajectory of the whole of West Africa, of Africa in general. I will change the trajectory. Mamma mia. For sure. Oh, in fact, in 24 hours, I will do that in 24 hours. Let me put this clearly. The conditions, the underdevelopment of Africa, Africans are 99% responsible for it. You cannot blame your failures on someone else. You have to own your failures and your successes. All right. But I just make reference to this because it's a situation that is existing, that is happening in the world, in Africa. So, but I just want you to know about it. I'm not manned at France at all. If I am manned, I'm manned at those French-speaking Africans. I'm manned at those French-speaking Africans. That's all. That's all. That's all. Why? Because he's the right. He's the one now. He's the one to be held accountable for whatever situations happening in their own countries. You cannot hold France responsible for what is happening in Africa. You can They can wake up at any day, all these French speaking African countries and kick France out and decide. So if they haven't not decided on that and they give France a chance to continue to exploit them, well, that is up to them. But I don't know how it is to be in their shoe, what it feels to be in that position, in their position. I don't know, but I'm looking at it, assessing the whole situation of as an external with an external view. But I don't know how easy it is to take such decision. But I think no matter how difficult it might be, is the right decision to take. All right, is the right decision to take. So you see how African countries still keep feeding Europe in the 21st century. They still feeding Europe because those all of those exploitations that France is doing in Africa, when it gets to France, it circulates around the European Union economy. It's one block, and yet they keep their mouth shut. They do not want to put sanction on France for the activities doing in Africa. So if they refuse to do that, then it means they're in support of it. And so if they're in support of that, then they are not a leader of democracy. They are not they are not the defender, the protector of the human rights. All of these are all hypocrisy. 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 Also, America included, America included in those one of those hypocritical countries. I think the only countries in the world that other developing countries and emerging markets should actually look up to as a good role model is China. China, not Europe, not America, is China. Do you know why that is? Because China is the only country in the world that come to full power, to world power, without having to exploit any single country. I'd say that again. China is only one of the countries in the world, the only country in the world that have come to become a full-fledged world power without having to profit from exploiting other countries. Not America, not France, not Italy, not Britain, not Germany, not Netherlands, not Belgium. All of these countries have involved in the exploitation of other countries before they get to where they are. So China, consequently, China is the only country in the world that became a full-fledged world power, a dominant world power, without having to exploit other countries. Consequently, I will recommend China as the only country as the good model for any country in the world. Yeah, I took just this is the only few thoughts I had to share with us today. There are obviously a lot of issues around the world happening around the world. All right, so we do subsequent videos and cover other issues happening around the world. Good day and bye for now.